The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. My name is Tracy Nyer, and I'm with the Virginia SBDC. I'll be your facilitator for today's webinar. For those of you that are not familiar, the Virginia SBDC is the largest and most effective provider of customized counseling and education for small businesses in Virginia. Most of our services are offered locally in 28 locations throughout the Commonwealth. Today's webinar is one of our educational offerings and is part of our ongoing webinar series, Google and Beyond, Marketing and Managing on the Web. Today's topic is finding, training, and managing virtual assistants, the small business owner's secret productivity tool. All of our Google and Beyond webinars are presented by Ray Sidney Smith, a web and mobile strategist, author of Solo Mo Success, Social Media, Local, and Web Small Business Marketing Strategy Explained, and president of W3 Consulting. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type those questions into the question window and Ray will do his best to answer them. Without further ado, here's Ray Sidney Smith.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you to the Virginia SBDC Network for having me here on the Beyond Google Marketing and Managing on the Web series. Today, we are going to be covering the topic of virtual assistants. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started for you all. Now is the time to ask questions. I'm more than happy to answer questions as we make our way through the webinar. Tracy is manning the Q&A panel, so if you have any questions, put them in there, and she'll know whether to interrupt me and ask me the question during and or holding it to the end, where I'll leave a couple minutes so that we can answer questions. If you have questions after the webinar, you can always tweet at W3 Consulting, hashtag it Beyond Google, and I'll know it's about one of the webinars. You can ask your question. Happy to answer them. I'm always usually accessible via Twitter, but I will have my email address on the final slide. So if you want to ask a personal or private question about the business, you can go ahead and email me afterward from my email address on the final slide. I've also emailed to Tracy a handout, a PDF of all of the slides of what we talked about today. So the links and all of the tools that I'll be talking about here are in that handout. So she has that to provide to you. So you don't have to worry about scribbling down everything and catching it as I make my way through, because some of this will have URLs, website addresses for things, and I might breeze through them, but don't worry, you don't have to capture them while I'm talking. Finally, go ahead and follow at Virginia SBDC, the Twitter profile for the Virginia SBDC network, where they publish upcoming webinars like this, as well as other resources and information that they're sharing with you all about resources in the Virginia area. Okay, so today's agenda is really to talk a little bit about why you would want to hire a virtual assistant in the first place, kind of defining and giving some premise as to the value of hiring a virtual assistant. And then we'll get into the crux of the main topic, the title topic, which is how to find VAs. Where would you source virtual assistants for your business? How do you go ahead and onboard and train those virtual assistants? I know that many small business owners come to me because I've had a lot of experience working with virtual assistants and saying, okay, well, once I find them, what do I do with them to make it most effective? And so we're going to talk about that. And then finally, how to manage virtual assistants, both from an ongoing perspective, but also from a practical perspective, the practical considerations that you need to sort of think about when it comes to managing virtual assistants so that they can actually be, a profit generating aspect of your business, not just a time waster or, a resources waster generally. I will leave, like I said, a minute or so for Q&A, but I'm happy to stay after with Tracy and answer any questions that we have after we're done. So with that, let's get into it. All right, so why would you want to hire a virtual assistant? There are really, three main blocks of areas as to why I think you should want to hire a virtual assistant in your business. One is that to hire an administrative assistant, bring them into your, office and have them work there with you requires a whole set of management practices. It requires you to pay a salary, which can be very expensive, and even, price hiring them, pricing you out of hiring them in the first place. So one is virtual assistants can save you money because you can actually have them do work explicitly that they need to do, and then you're only paying for the time that they are working, right? So you are not hiring an employee in essence. You are selecting a 1099, independent contractor style person or a business that is going to handle those services for you. So they become a vendor. They're not an employee, and through that relationship, you can usually save money. So that's number one. Two is that any administrative professional, while many are fantastic, and I've had wonderful administrative assistants over the years, they usually don't have all of the skills necessary to do the many facets of your business that are required. So in being able to hire a virtual assistant, you can actually hire one or several different virtual assistants, each with a specialty that either you don't have or that you need to extend your own specialized services, right? So if you happen to work in, say, the legal profession, you could hire a virtual legal assistant who is then able to provide those specific legal services to you, and therefore they know what needs to be done. They know how to liaise with your clients so that they're not committing unauthorized practice of law, and they're following ethical standards, and they're doing all of those things in confluence with your law practice, right? So you can hire these specialized services, and then you can have a generalized administrative system. So remember that, one admin may not be able to do everything, but multiple can potentially be really advantageous to the business. And finally, virtual assistants can fill in the gap for you in a couple of different areas. For many business owners, these are mundane tasks that you don't want to do or that feel like it's a slog. The other are tasks that you tend to procrastinate on, tasks that you are putting off and putting off and putting off, and you need someone to step in and make it happen. Maybe they won't do it as well as you would, but it'll get done versus it sitting there and festering, like filing, basic, sales tax forms and putting in those kinds of administrative bureaucratic documentation and so on and so forth. You can really use them for some of these tasks, or repetitive tasks that are recurring and are seemingly mindless, quote unquote, but they require someone to be thoughtful and to get it done on a very consistent schedule. And it's very procedural, so you can show someone how to do that, and then it becomes something they do on a regular basis, and you don't have to really worry about it anymore. Virtual assistants actually came about in the 1990s. I know that seems strange to some people, but the industry has been around for almost 30 years. And here we are in 2018 as of the time of this webinar, and the maturity of the industry has come to a place where there are industry associations, there are many platforms that give you the ability to be able to find and hire virtual assistants with a great deal of certainty as to the product you're going to get. Okay, so really lean on those organizations and the structure and kind of the institutional knowledge that has come along with the industry. That's going to be a very real help to you as we make our way along through today, and then of course into you actually hiring them. So just think about that in as you go forward, is like, think about what types of resources and places, and I can obviously suggest some if you have that question, as to where you can find those kinds of resources. Okay, so first up, we're going to be talking about where to find a VA, and this comes down to the fact that there are many different ways to find a VA. And just like off the top of your head, you can think, well, you could go to Craigslist, and you can post a Craigslist posting to ask if people have VAs. You can go to your network and ask people about if they know any virtual assistants that can make recommendations and referrals, and so on and so forth. So, you already know that you can find people through the basic mechanisms of asking other small business owners that asking your network, posting on Twitter or social media, and figuring that out. If you hit that wall and you have not yet found a virtual assistant, then this is where you can fill in that knowledge gap and have resources to be able to find a virtual assistant. Okay, so First and foremost, before you find a virtual assistant, you need to do a couple of things. And I know that small business owners like to jump in and say, okay, I'm going to hire a virtual assistant, and then all of a sudden my life is going to be great because this person is going to do all the things I don't want to do. But in reality, you have to do quite a bit of work to make sure that a virtual assistant relationship with your business works. And so this is kind of my steps. These are my steps that I typically guide clients through when they say that they want to hire a virtual assistant. So first is that you need to learn the technology that you already have. Many times a client will come to me and say, oh, well, I have this tool and I have that tool and I just can't quite get all the work done. And what they don't know is that the tool itself probably does 80 to 90% of the work if they just set it up right. If they knew the functions and the features of the tool and learned how to effectively use it, then they actually wouldn't need an assistant for that job. Maybe they would, because the business will still grow because they become more efficient with their time and their understanding of the technology. So if you have those questions, please reach out and we're happy to work with you to help you understand how to use your technology better. But the first thing is to take advantage of technology automation. Much of the technology that's out there is really competent at being able to do things, what are called workflows, being able to tie one piece of technology to another, and therefore do a lot of the mundane, repetitive things that you might otherwise, at one point in the past, have done yourself or have done in a manual fashion. Now can be done in a much more automated fashion, if not semi-automated, where it can be done. Also, think about putting together your own, what I call a virtual assistant, right? And that's a combination of a couple of different new tools in the world. One is that every person who has a smartphone has a basically a little personal digital assistant built into their phone, whether that's Siri on the Apple platform, Google Assistant on the Android platform, Cortana on the Microsoft devices that are out there. And the reality is you can actually embed Google Assistant on iPhone and so on and so forth. So you have lots of opportunities to be able to blend these tools together where you can ask them to go ahead and do things for you that you might otherwise have expected someone else to do. It's simple as adding something to the calendar can now be done by voice. Going ahead and making reservations soon will be something that these assistants will be able to do. So really start to think about what the tools can do, how they can do them, and how they can be tied to web workflow automation tools like IFT, Zapier, Microsoft Flow, and PySync. So these are all tools with their own flavor and specialties. Some of them are free, some of them have a small fee associated with them. The first three are designed to connect two different tools together or multiple different tools together, and you can actually string them together so that they create a cascade or sequential set of workflows. So you can say, okay, when I post to Twitter, I want this to go ahead and also post it to Instagram and Facebook and Pinterest and so on and so forth. And once it's done doing that, and it goes to Instagram, I want it to save that photograph to my Google Drive or my OneDrive or Dropbox folder. And maybe at that point, then I want it to upload that image to my website so that it becomes a blog post on my website, so I can have a draft of it and start typing a blog post in there. So you can have it do all of that, and that can be done in IFT for free right now. If you have a WordPress website, most certainly you can do that. But you can actually learn these tools without a lot of upstart cost in terms of time trying to learn them, and they can do a lot for your business. So in essence, you can patchwork a virtual assistant, basically a digital form of a virtual assistant, through these tools. So learn the tools you have, and then use these types of tools to optimize your workflow. I will point out that PySync is primarily for synchronizing contacts, and this is a real problem across a lot of different platforms. So say, for example, you open up a new client file. Say you're a service-based business or a product-based business where tracking contact information for your clients is really important, which is usually important for most businesses, right? So they come in and they make an order. You have to enter their information in somehow, and there's credit card information that's being captured, and there's all kinds of other databases. Well, PySync works in the background to be able to synchronize all of those contact pieces and to keep them up to date in the background. Okay, so PySync has that specialized workflow automation that's really helpful for for those kinds of things. So if you work with a CRM, a customer relationship management software, it can go ahead and take that data from there and automatically push them to other places. So think about how you can reduce your overhead in terms of time spent through the use of some of these automation tools. Okay, so first, optimize the workflow. Okay, now that you've optimized the workflow, next up, you really want to think about all of the things that you do, and then start sort of putting them into a different criteria. Okay, the three general groupings of criteria I think about are repetitive work uh, uh, that you understand with when you do them with great regularity, you understand them kind of on what I call a checklist level, right? You could make a list of all of the steps that are needed to do that. Okay, and you can itemize that. Two is work that doesn't need to be done at your home or office, right? So it just requires either a computer or a phone, web access, and they're good to go. So if that's kind of the virtual work concept, right? Anything that can be done outside of your work or home. Work that can be accomplished if you send supplies to someone. Okay. Now this isn't for really advanced fulfillment, right? If you're trying to do fulfillment and delivery services, you should probably get a dedicated service for that where they have a warehouse and that kind of thing. But a virtual assistant can do basic mailings, right? If you have postcards that you need to send out, or thank you letters that you need to send out on a regular basis, or if you produce a lot of correspondence, that's something where, yeah, they don't have, they may not have your letterhead and envelopes sitting in your office. They can't be there if it's sitting in your office, but you can just have it shipped directly to them. And now you type up a letter or they type up a letter and they can send that letter out on your behalf directly from their location. So think about that in that sense. Send the letterhead, envelopes, labels, postcards, postage, and they're good to go. Uh, Also, many kinds of physical errands, I think people tend to not think virtual assistants can do, but some are willing to do it. So think about the fact that you may want someone to go to a electronic store and go look at the various options of something. Maybe go test out a particular product or look at it. Figure out what it's all about, and then come back and order it for you, or give you some feedback on what it is and what they liked about it or didn't like about it. So you can do these kinds of physical errands, or going to pick out flowers, right? And then having those flowers shipped or delivered to a client, a friend, a spouse, or otherwise. So you can have these kinds of physical tasks actually done. I do want to say though, at this point, that you have to keep in mind that there are some kinds of work that do not lend themselves well to virtual assistants. At least in my experience, that comes to be the case. There are some obvious ones, like work that requires in-person, face-to-face contact with either customers or colleagues. If you have a retail store, virtual assistant can't be there physically in the store. Maybe you can put them on video with a camera and a webcam, but that's getting beyond maybe where our technology is today. And you may want to think about having a real in-person person to man your retail store, right? You wouldn't have a virtual assistant do that. Seems obvious, but I'm just covering my bases. As I said before, high-scaled fulfillment services, you should probably have someone who's going to be able to pack and ship hundreds or thousands of products a day. Be a service that can do that. Massive data collection. Sometimes you want a virtual assistant to do a research project or something like that. That's all well and good. Go ahead and they can do that. But if this is going to be an ongoing, highly sophisticated research project, you may want to look at getting a data collection or research firm who can handle that type of service. There's certainly some really great software out there that can do this as well. So it's just a matter of finding the right tool to match what you need. And then, of course, there is the reality of specialized services that you could not outsource. Okay, so and that falls into the category of it's such a specialty that you couldn't you couldn't have someone do that. If you have some kind of health and wellness practice, you can't hire a virtual occupational therapist, right? The occupational therapist needs to be in person with the customer, and so therefore, you would need to hire an employee who could do that. Even if they were a remote employee, they wouldn't be virtual because they wouldn't be able to do their work via Skype or another video technology. Okay, so just keep that in mind as you make your way through. So you're going to make a list now of all of the things that kind of come to mind, and you can do that actually while I'm talking here, right? Start making a list of the things that someone else can do in the business, right? What are the projects that you could, would, should do but aren't, right? And let's take away the moral judgment and the self-judgment here and just make an objective list of those things. And now what you have is a running list of what potentially a virtual assistant can do. Next, you're going to identify your budget. Never go into a situation where you say, okay, I need these things done, and you go to the virtual assistant and say, okay, how much are you going to cost? Right? Because now you're in a greater conflict zone, not for between you and the virtual assistant, right? If both of you who have good, healthy boundaries, you'll easily be able to understand that you're not going to work well together if you want someone to do something for $20 per hour and that person works at $50 per hour. It's just not going to happen, right? Unless they're desperate for a business, and then maybe it is. But the reality is that you should be able to know from your own business how much that cost from your time is worth, right? Tally up the amount of time of the things you want done, itemize that and say, okay, I bill out at X number of dollars per hour. Even if you don't bill your own hours, come up with an hourly rate for yourself and figure out how much time that would be worth to you. And that will at least give you some frame of reference for how much the budget would be worth for what you would pay a virtual assistant to make that happen. And presumably the virtual assistant wouldn't be your hourly rate. So you take some percentage of that, say 50%. I'm just throwing that out there off the top of my head, but you say 50% of your hourly rate, and now that's reasonably what you might pay for the time spent to do the tasks that are on your list, right? And now they're individualized, so you can add up, these 3 tasks are something that I could afford every month, and for a virtual assistant to do. And this is now the budget range that I'm working with. Okay. Now with that budget in mind, you can go out there and match yourself up with a virtual assistant based on what packages they have published on their website, or when you discuss it with them, you can say, listen, this is kind of my budget. This is what I'm looking at doing. And if you can work out a package for me that fits my needs, then voila, we're good to go. Okay. It gives you a much greater place to stand, not in conflict with the virtual assistant, but in conflict with your own needs and your expectations as it relates to what you're going to actually get for your money. Finally, you want to go ahead and review the following platforms so that you can understand what work needs to be done, again, your budget, and expectations. I find that most often than not, the conflicts that happen between virtual assistant and business owner tend to be expectation management. And so you really need to understand what you want from them, and not just the items that you list as work, and not just the money involved, but what's the quality and other types of expectations that you might have for what that virtual assistant may do. Okay, many people just don't think about it that way, but it really is important. So the first one is the IVAA, the International Virtual Assistant Association. They're actually an organization that accredits virtual assistants. So if you want to become a virtual assistant, you would go to the IVAA and they would help you become a graduate of their program, and then you would get certified as a virtual assistant. Well, you can actually go on there and submit a request for a virtual assistant. You go into this form at ivaa.org/submit-RFP. And again, like I said, you have the links will be available to you from Tracy. But the idea here is that you go to the site, you complete the form, and then they try to match you with a virtual assistant that can do the work. Okay, and so that's really, really helpful. Next up is a platform called Upwork. It's the one that I use most often, but it allows you to go onto the platform and look for all kinds of people in the gig economy or the virtual work economy. But in this particular case, you can look for a virtual assistant on the platform, separate from all of the other specialists. But you can also find specialists. So say maybe you need a virtual web designer. You need someone who can step in and do some virtual web design work for your business on occasion. You can go to Upwork and do that, right? And again, I'm saying this in deference to the fact that you haven't already tried to find someone locally. You haven't asked your SBDC for someone who locally can help you. You want to keep local monies local, okay, first and foremost. So keep that in mind. But when you can't find that, or you can't find it within your budget, then you can certainly look to these other platforms. I do make note that there are kind of some runners up to Upwork. So there's Freelancer, there's Guru, and LinkedIn actually has their own platform for this, for freelance work, which is the LinkedIn ProFinder platform. So you can go ahead and there's a link to it in the handout. Finally, the platform Zirtual, they can basically match you up with a virtual assistant through these platforms. And I think for Zirtual is probably more in the next category of businesses, but I left them here anyway because I wasn't quite sure. But you can go to Zirtual and then you hire for a select number of hours, but I believe you are paired up with an individual virtual assistant. And that's really the key of these, which is you're being put in touch with an individual and you're working one-to-one with a VA. And then Longer Days is kind of a unique company. So you have one virtual assistant who works at Longer Days, and then they have a whole team behind them. So they are based out of Michigan. And so they're US based. I think so, or Zirtual. And so they're all US based. They're all in one physical location at Longer Days. And so you have one point of contact, but then many other specialists who are behind the scenes who can do the different types of work. So maybe you need a little bit of, WordPress blog writing. You need someone to update your WordPress. Well, those are two different people in two different specialties, but they both work at Longer Days and can help you through the same point of contact. Okay, so that's kind of something to keep in mind. Okay, so this next set of companies are kind of in the same vein as Longer Days, and they may actually be replicated here because I like them. But first up is a Virginia-based virtual assistant company, youralteregos.com, and the owner of that is fantastic, and she knows how to really tailor your business. She actually does something called online business management, or an OBM. It's kind of another layer of virtual assistant work. So they do virtual assistant work, but they also step in as kind of a chief operating officer of your business. And they do this all virtually to be able to help you be successful as a business in this virtual capacity, kind of taking over different higher level business roles. And it obviously is the cost is commensurate with the level that they're taking on in terms of risk, but it's certainly something that you want to pay attention to. Next up is Don't Panic Management, and they're another virtual assistant service, and they provide all kinds of really cool services for entrepreneurs. And so as virtual assistants, they've created these different areas that they specialize in, and they do a really fantastic job of it. Jess Ostroff there is fantastic. So definitely check out Don't Panic Management for that. But again, you have a whole company acting as your virtual assistant. Zirtual, again, talked about them. Longer Days, talked about them already. So that's more of the virtual assistant team-based company where you can hire a virtual assistant who you don't have to worry about if one person gets sick, then you don't have a virtual assistant, because now you have a whole company that's managing your tasks virtually. Okay, then we come to the more specialized virtual assistant thing. So when you need to find a more specialized virtual assistant, these are some areas where I feel like some people tend to have trouble. And so these are the ones I'm presenting. Obviously, if you have another need, let me know and I can maybe put you in the right direction. One is for in-person tasks. You need someone to maybe do some virtual work, data entry, calling clients, that kind of thing. You can do that through TaskRabbit. They can do those kinds of virtual work. But say on occasion you need them to run an errand. You need them to go pick up some flowers, pick up some groceries, and bring them to your place of business. Replenish some of the supplies at your office, and or you need them to do some handyman work. Maybe some of the things around your office needs to be done, but you don't want them really, you don't need to hire someone to be there all the time. You can have a TaskRabbit who's kind of blended between the two of those, where they can do in-person things, or you need someone to, do some work and then take it over to somebody. And so you can hire these people who are geographically situate near where they need to do those things, right? So you need someone in Seattle to go walk something over to a business, do that thing, print it, and walk it over there. Well, TaskRabbit can do those kinds of things. So I put it in the category of virtual, even though they do in-person stuff, because they can do it remotely. Call Ruby. So if you need a receptionist, you can actually have this virtual assistant company become your receptionist for the company. You, in essence, forward your main line, or when you're not able to answer the phone, excuse me, you would have Call Ruby then pick up the phone and handle it intermediary. Call Ruby's not cheap. They're not inexpensive either. So they're a great company. So if for some reason you can't afford Call Ruby, just shoot me an email, and I have a list of other companies that you can look at that also do these services. Different style, certainly a different caliber, but you get what you can afford. So you can go ahead and I can send you that list of those other companies. And then finally, Fancy Hands. Fancy Hands is a company that does short tasks. I think it's their rule is like under 20 minutes, like 20 minutes or less or something like that. But they're useful and I've used them for years. So Fancy Hands, the team headed up by Ted Roden in New York City, they are all US based, and they are able to make dinner reservations. Say you need them to call the DMV and find out, some information that obviously not personal information about you, but information about how to get your voter registration updated if that's where you do it. Just like the weird random things, calling your telecommunications company and getting them on the line and updating your credit card information, like just all of those things that are just they take 10 minutes here, they take 15-20 minutes there, and they're just a big time drain throughout your day when you could be utilizing that time for billable hours or for more productive use of your time. Fancy Hands can do all those kinds of little things, and you can make things recurring. So say you want to get you want to get a reminder of something once a week, right? You can have Fancy Hands call you and give you that reminder once a week. And so it's done based on a number of requests that you purchase, on a regular basis, and then you have those requests to be able to make the requests. You can email. There's a mobile application. You can make requests by voice, by calling in, by forwarding an email with a task. So you have lots of different options with them as well. So I like Fancy Hands. All right. Oh, and this one I added last minute. So Fin is actually fairly new. They're a startup. I think they're based out of the West Coast, and they actually blend a human virtual assistant with artificial intelligence or machine learning technology. So what the technology can do, it does, and what only a human can currently do, the human does. And so you pay a fee to have these things done, and what the AI can do, it does, and then you pay for the time that the human has to spend in doing the rest. So really cool concept. I've just started playing around with the tool, and I've been fairly impressed. So you might want to check it out. All right, now we're going to talk about training and then managing your VA. And I just want to cover some of the tenets of making sure that you effectively know how to train your VA, because I think a lot of people who are either solopreneurs or micropreneurs don't have a lot of experience in training people, and therefore you get into a position of not knowing how to best take advantage of your VA, and then also you don't know how to deal with a non-employee who you have to manage, right? So these are kind of the principles that I want to cover in the balance of our time together. So first and foremost, you need to get to know your VA. I know this, again, it seems kind of basic, but it is so important for you to get to know your VA, and that means learning how they work, learning their personality, and getting to know how they interact with other people, how they collaborate with other people. Because if they're only collaborating with you, that's fine. But if they need to interact with customers or vendors or potential customers, you need to make sure that they can have a presence that's one that you want to represent your business. So just know that, right? If they're completely back office, virtual assistants where they're never going to touch your outward, face of the business, that's okay. But you still need to get to know them, because you need to know that that's what they plan on doing, that's how they plan on working, and just kind of getting to know them. But also, you need to explain explicitly your work style to your VA. Do you work late nights? Are you someone who doesn't like to be interrupted by phone? Do you not like to receive email? Do you like to receive an email with everything that you want to talk about in one email? Or do you like individual emails that have one topic per email so that you can individually reply to each of those emails as you're able to, right? All of those things seem kind of like, oh yeah, of course that's the way I like doing that thing. But how is your virtual assistant to know that? Right? They're coming in blind. And some virtual assistants do a really great job of interviewing you and learning as much as they can about you so that they can properly become a seamless and integrative part of your business. And some don't. You need to make sure that they know that information, though, because if you like to greet clients in a particular way via email, if you like to have a particular type of language in your communications, and you like your documents formatted a particular way, and you want to work from 6 to 9 p.m. at night, and your virtual assistant doesn't work at those during those hours, and that's when you need him or her, then you've got a problem. So you need to make sure that you really do some getting to know you time with your virtual assistant. Second is you need to set aside time to show your VA how to do the work. Okay, you can't say, okay, I need this posted to our website, and then just basically say, go do it. Right? That just doesn't make any sense. You need to make sure they have access to the systems. You need to make sure they know what the content is that needs to be posted. Are they producing the content? Are you providing the content? How are you providing the content? What you should really do is set aside the time to show them what the task is that you expect them to do. And then I really like the idea of being on video together, whether it's Skype or Zoom or one of the other video meeting technologies, and being there together in real time so that they can ask questions. Wait, you moved really quickly through that screen, and what was it that you actually did there? Why did you check that box? Oh, it looks like you're using an Outlook plugin that does something that my system doesn't. So should I get that Outlook plugin, right? All of those things that you should be explaining to them along the way, and that they should be identifying as resources that they don't currently have or is not built into their workflow, you need to show them. This is why the next recommendation is so helpful. I usually say to record those video meetings so that you have a record of you walking them through it with their own questions, and then if they need to, they can go back and refer to those. Most VAs in these onboarding sessions will typically take copious notes, at least the ones that I've worked with, and that's really great, because then they can kind of take time signatures, so they don't have to watch the entire video. They can kind of just jump to that portion and know, okay, this is where we did this update and got ready for this Twitter chat, and these are the things that Ray likes to do when he gets ready for a Twitter chat, so I can get it ready for him, and it could be, up on his screen and ready to go when he's ready to start, right? So recording the meetings is super, super helpful. This takes me to my next step, which is to create step number 4, which is to create an operations manual that you then share with your virtual assistant or your virtual assistants. And so the idea here is that you might decide to record, as I have done. So I've recorded all of the just regular recurring tasks that I need to get done. And some of them are short tasks. They're not particularly big, complex tasks that take multiple days. They may just take 10 minutes. But the reality is that I want them done in a very specific way, maybe because I'm just type A, but also because I need them to look like me, right? I need their work to look like I did it, to my standards. Not necessarily look like I did it, but look like the company did it. And so I want them to do it in the same way. So with the recording, I record the video, I upload it to YouTube. It's a private video. No one can see it because I've only shared it with my VAs, right? Because you can do that on YouTube. If you don't know that, you can upload private videos that you only share with individual users. And so therefore, I put those links now in the operations manual. And now it really doesn't matter which VA I have do the work, right? I can send it to a Longer Days, I can send it to a Zirtual, I can send it to Fancy Hands, and any of them should be able to watch the video in 5-10 minutes, know exactly what to do, and they can maybe watch the video, pause it, continue the task, step 2, watch the next part of the video, do the task, and so on and so forth, and or do it in real time while watching the video, whatever works for them. But now there isn't really a large margin of error because it's there in video. I also like in the operations manual, though, to actually itemize, walk them through the steps of what needs to be done. Now, this doesn't need to be done for every task that you plan for them to do. There may be virtual assistants who are more expert at doing things like social media or blog writing or otherwise, where you don't have to kind of micromanage them in that sense. So know the difference between what needs to be done where and how. Okay, so in the operations manual, I'm just providing for those things that I have clear and specific expectations as to the quality and way it should be done. And then I've recorded video and given them step-by-step to be able to do that. So if it's not done to that standard, then there's a clear conversation that I can have because I've already done the work up front to make sure that it does that. Make sure that you keep it updated also. So if an interface changes, say, you want them to upload a video to YouTube and do a couple of things in the YouTube platform the way you want them done, if YouTube changes, you need to then re-record the video or edit it or let them know that that part of the video is now outdated. So as I said, you can do screen recordings using QuickTime Player on the Mac, which is the free software that is installed on macOS, or most Mac OS X devices now today come with free screen recording software. You can actually also record on Windows by downloading and installing ShareX. And again, links to these are in the handout. But ShareX is a free open source tool that allows you to record screen and your voice. So you can actually be talking over the work that you're doing on screen. And since they're a virtual assistant, you should be able to do that. Now, if it's something that you need them to do physically, right? So say it's, for lack of a better example, origami, right? So say you want them to build something in origami. Well, you could just turn on the webcam on your computer or get a webcam and record yourself doing that thing and then using that video to be able to show them, right? So you're not really limited today because you can record things and easily share that recording. Take advantage of those things. Finally, in the training side, you should state upfront what channel you want to use to communicate with your virtual assistant. Okay, so we use many different platforms for being able to communicate and do project management with our clients, and we want to make sure that our VAs are using those same platforms so that they're doing it where we are best able to answer questions and be on top of things with regard to our clients. So you might decide that that's Telegram, which is an open source messaging application. Maybe you decide it's Facebook Messenger or one of the other messengers because they're doing social media. That might be the appropriate place for them to ask you questions about Facebook and Twitter and so on and so forth. Maybe you decide that it's solely email. Maybe you want them to call you. Maybe you want them to use for us, we use G Suite internally, so we have Hangouts chat, which is kind of akin to Slack, if people know what Slack is. And so we use Hangouts chat in our company for working with them. And so our virtual assistants know that if they have a question for me, they don't need to be sending me email. They don't need to be calling me. If they do need to talk to me over the phone, they can let me know what the question is and then find a time for us to be able to talk, over the phone by scheduling directly into my calendar, right? I can't take phone calls live because I've got too many other things going on. So they're guided to know all of those things up front. So while you're training your VA, make sure they know how to get in touch with you, because if they can't communicate with you and you can't communicate with them in the right ways, then that is going to break down the relationship. And once you've broken down the relationship, they're not going to be able to work optimally, okay? All right, next up is managing your VA. Excuse me. And so we really want to be able to take your VA from now they know how the work needs to get done, your expectations, your workflow and work style, their workflow and their work style, and how to really communicate to now how to really step it up a level once the work starts getting done, right? So on an ongoing basis, this is what I want you to really take to heart as you're making your way through your business ramping up with the use of a VA. Number one, I can't repeat this more often. I think people don't understand this. You need to understand the work styles, especially when they conflict, right? So I'm a morning person. I have a VA who is an evening person, right? So we've had to meet in the middle. She's fantastic, and I want to continue using her for very specific types of work that she's a specialist in doing. And so it's not that I don't want her to work, and I want her to work best, but we had to really explain to each other what was causing the conflict between us. And it wasn't like we were yelling at each other. It wasn't like, feuding spouses. It was just more like, oh, I expected that to be done in a different way at a different time. And from her perspective, she expected me to want it this way because from an industry standard perspective, I was wanting it different than how she would do it for any other person and other client. And so we had to really explain to each other what the middle ground was there. And we talked about it, and it's wonderful. It's beautiful. It's a great relationship because now we know what each other are expecting, right? And going further to that, she was doing a heck of a lot more work to make it the way I wanted it to be. So I just decided to pay her more, right? And I know that in the long run, she now doesn't resent having to do the extra work. She's getting a higher billable hour for doing that, but now she's going to do the work to the quality I want it to be done. And so by having that open dialogue with your VA and knowing and saying to her, okay, this is going to still be profitable for us as a business, even by paying you the higher hourly rate, that's okay because I want to make sure it's done right. That's the end result. We're going to lose a little bit more. It's not going to be as profitable, but that's okay if it's done well. So that's our standard. So it will really it'll really go a long way to keep that open dialogue with one another. So you're going to want to set expectations, right? And you want to set those expectations up on the front end of working with your VA as a whole, but also on a project basis. So that's what I kind of mean here in this section. Number 2 is to really think about what are your expectations for each project, right? And you have to keep reiterating, especially if you work with multiple VAs, because you need to make sure you have a consistent message to each of them about what those standards are. And for each task or project, I really like to say, it doesn't really matter. I don't care. Just get it done. There may be some things that I wouldn't like about it, but I'm not going to review this. So I will usually put in a round of revisions in terms of quality. That usually what I mean by quality is the number of times I need to look at it to adjust the work product to tailor it to what I would like it to look like, right? But for some people, that's not a quality metric. Maybe the quality metric is that it has a particular style, it has a particular feel, that whatever it is, right? And you can give them examples of your work product so they can kind of match to it. So you decide on what the quality is, and you explain that in qualitative terms. You can explain to them what the volume is, right? If you spend an hour doing some online research, I expect you to have X number of potential leads in that hour's time frame. If you don't tell them that, then when they come back to you and they say, oh, I found 7 leads and you expected 70, that's a mismatch of expectations, and that's your fault, right? It's not the VA's fault if you did not put that expectation up front. And finally, deadlines, right? I need this by Friday at 12 noon. And by setting clear deadlines for everything, then you have a better chance of them meeting those deadlines and for them not to delay your projects so that you can keep moving forward, right? So if they're doing one piece of a project, make sure their deadline is before the time frame necessary for you to complete your next leg of the project, right? So if you need to get your client something by Monday at 5 p.m., then you want them to get it to you by Friday at noon, so that if they're late and they get it to you at 6 p.m. on Friday, you still have Monday to be able to review and work on that project and get it to your client on time. So set those expectations. Next up, you need to identify milestones. And what milestones are is an opportunity to reflect on the relationship, the virtual assistant relationship, to figure out what has worked well and to capitalize on what's working well, and then to finally figure out what's not working well and how you can optimize the relationship and the working relationship and the output. So those are the three fundamental pieces, tenets of a milestone, right? Reflection, celebration, and that means showing gratitude, thanking them for hitting those metrics, for being good at the work they do. Just because they're a vendor, just because they're not your employee, doesn't mean that you shouldn't show gratitude and thanks and celebrate with them successes. And then, of course, correcting course. How do we get the things that went off the path back on the path? And how do we make sure that we stay on the path more often in the future? So this kind of debriefing, I usually like to set up an initial kind of grace period or introductory period with any virtual assistant. So I'll say, okay, let's work together for a month, and then we'll extend that to 3 months. And in those two different periods, we're going to work together and do this, set up the milestones, right? Milestone's going to be each week for a month perspective. And then at the end of the month, we're going to do a debriefing. And if I decide not to work with you in the future as a virtual assistant, that's just because we weren't able to correct course enough and fast enough to be able to continue the relationship. And so that's your opportunity. And you need to put that right up front, with your virtual assistant. If you're going to have these kinds of milestones and debriefings, then they're your opportunities to exit a contract, right? And that should be written and stipulated into your agreements with them, so that you're able to say, okay, we tried, for whatever reason, we're just not meshing, and there's no reason for me to continue to keep giving energy to this relationship, because that's time, money, and resources that my business needs to focus on another VA at this point in time, right? Or that's the opportunity for you to identify, hey, we're not making money. We're not making enough money to satisfy the budget. My budgeting was off, right? So we need to reduce the amount of hours that you're working on these things, and I'm going to have to do some of that work, or someone else who's going to have to do that kind of work. So really think about how you work with those folks in those milestone and debriefing moments, and whether you continue working together. Okay, next, have regular huddles. These are virtual huddles, either by phone or by video chat. You could do these weekly, semi-monthly, or monthly, but it's basically, what are you working on? What am I working on? What's coming down the pike? Super easy, but it's really, really helpful to have those virtual huddles. I have them weekly because I like the idea of being able to sit down with everybody virtually and say, okay, what are the big, we have some big support ticket issues we got to deal with regarding our web hosting business. What's the status of those things? Okay, what are the problems? Here are the things I think you should do as a solution. Okay, these are the things we're going to do in marketing. These are the things we're going to be doing in our customer service space. What are the things we're doing? What are the projects we're working on? And just everybody being there on the same page and knowing what everybody else is working on really just helps make sure people stay motivated and productive. Number 5 and 6 are kind of paired with one another. Number 5 is that you need to learn to give good feedback, because maybe you have some employees or maybe you don't. But the point is that most small business owners are not in the business of giving feedback. And so this resource is just fantastic. It's a 4-part podcast series that Manager Tools has put out. So if you go to that link, again, there's a clickable link in the handout, but it's called Giving Effective Feedback. So you search the page, and there are 4 episodes there on that page, and you want to listen to them. And it just goes over some of the important skills necessary, the techniques necessary to be able to give good feedback. And then on the flip side, I'm not sure why it's not there. Number 6 is you need to learn to receive good feedback. Okay, so if your virtual assistant decides to come back to you and say, hey, Ray, when you gave me that assignment, you actually left out like 3 parts of the resources that I needed to like parts, step number 3, 4, and 7. I was missing the resources for those. So I wasn't able to complete it as fast a period of time because they just weren't there and I had to hunt them down. And that's really great feedback for me, not to take personally, but objectively knowing, oh yeah, that's right. This is going to now show up on a bill. I'm going to have to pay for that because it was my error, and I can reduce those errors if I'm aware of them. But if I wasn't aware of them, then when I got the bill, then and it was extra hours, I'm going to say, well, my expectation was set that way. But in reality, there was an intervening issue, and that needs to be brought to my attention. And you need to be a big enough person to be able to receive that and know that that's not someone making a moral judgment of you, but just stating facts. And that's what people should really try to do, is just take this objectively. Okay, a couple of practical considerations as it relates to managing your virtual assistants, and I just wanted to cover some of these practical considerations because they're important. One is use a password manager. So often than not, I see people sending like a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet with all of your usernames and passwords, potentially even credit card information to virtual assistants. You want to keep honest people honest here. So using a password manager allows you to be able to share login information with the other users without actually sharing some of this information explicitly, right? So they're capable of making purchases with your credit card. If they say use LastPass and you share a credit card profile with them, they're then able to make online purchases with it, but they're not actually capable of seeing the number, because the number is encrypted and just automatically placed into the website for them without them actually having the numbers to copy and paste in. So the tools exist for you to be able to manage this kind of information. You don't want to, honestly, you shouldn't want to give your username and password to a virtual stranger, because they could potentially walk off with that information and do something, unfortunate with that access. So you want to be able to control some of these things. It doesn't always work. It's sometimes very frustrating because the technology doesn't always work and that kind of thing. So be aware. Plus, some of the technology now will identify. Say, if someone attempts to log in a place where you're not physically situate, it may look at that as a criterion for it being a fraudulent or a hacker trying to get into your account, right? You live in Virginia, a virtual assistant in Texas tries to log in for you into your account legitimately, but then it blocks them because it sees that person logging in from a location that it has not seen you log in from before. Okay, so nothing's perfect, but then you work around those things. Okay, so maybe they need to log in through a VPN into your computer so they can access the system and so on and so forth. So work through those things well. You need to set up a file storage system. You can't have a virtual assistant and be sharing everything via email back and forth. That's a heck of a lot of email traffic, and it becomes inefficient. Documents get lost, and that's not where documents are supposed to live. They're not supposed to live in your email. They're supposed to live in a document management system. So set up a file system, whether it's alphabetical or by client or by area of business, but set up a file storage system and give your virtual assistant explicit access to those areas only the areas that they need. So Google Drive inside the G Suite platform is a good option. You could use OneDrive through the Microsoft Office 365 or Dropbox even. Okay. Next, and I think finally, is the idea of creating a dedicated email address and or phone number for your virtual assistant. And this is, again, just an issue of having some level of control and protection over the business. So one, you need to make sure that if you create, Joe at yourbusinessname.com, that Joe knows, your virtual assistant knows, that they should only be transacting email on behalf of your business. They shouldn't be using that as a personal email account. And if you use a phone number, then what are the boundaries of using that line? And you can use tools like Line 2 or Smart Line, which allow you to have an app on your phone, and the person can then, or Google Voice can work also, but that's a little bit more difficult if you don't have G Suite. But if you have G Suite, you can use Google Voice. But the point is that it gives now a separate individual phone number, and now when someone goes and calls that number, they can get through the VA, but they're getting your business, right? They're getting your business front end, which is important. And if that VA ever leaves, then that Line 2 app account or that SmartLine account is your account to be able to redirect to your new and future VA. Okay, so you want to be able to control those kinds of communication, front-end communication, if they are having outbound communications on behalf of your company. Just a couple of resources if you want to check them out. There's 2 books, and again, these are linked in the handouts for you for ease of access. But the Virtual Freedom by Chris Ducker, and Never Work Again by Erland Bakke. Both are kind of good, forays into sort of a deeper dive into the virtual assistant world and how to take best advantage of them. So those are just 2 options for you. With that, I will turn it over to you, Tracy, for Q&A. And I know we're at time, so I'm going to put up my email address. If you have questions, feel free to email me, and I'll be happy to answer them there. And so, Tracy?
Great, thanks, Ray. I wanted to start out by saying I went ahead and posted the handouts in the handout window that's part of GoToWebinar, so you can download them now. I am going to email them out as well, since several people have said that they've had trouble downloading them. There's also, so before I ask the questions, let me go ahead and close the webinar out for folks that are needing to get on with their day, so we can respect your time. Thank you all for participating today. Today's webinar was recorded and it'll be posted on the Virginia SBDC's website under live webinars and recordings. In a couple of hours, you'll receive an follow-up email on this webinar with an evaluation link. Please help us to continue to improve our training by taking the time to complete that evaluation. If you'd like to fill it out now, I have posted it in the chat window. So we hope you will join us for our next webinar on July 12th, the best marketing for your handmade businesses. Okay, well, we do have a couple of questions. The first is, do you have a document, or does the document that you're sharing provide links to, documents you can share which will protect our proprietary information that's shared with our VAs, e.g. non-disclosure agreement? Also, do you have a sample contract that legitimizes our business arrangements with our VA?
So I would go to Docracy, DOCRACY.com, and do a search there for, say, non-disclosure agreement and any contracts. Those are documents that are submitted by organizations or by attorneys themselves, and so they're good sample documents to start with. But then beyond that, of course, I would say reach out to Business Legal Counsel and have them look at it. If you're concerned about those kinds of things, you should hire legal counsel locally who would be able to help you with that. And many virtual assistants will have their own contracts that they would provide to you, along with the kind of necessary clauses built into them. And so I would go to those resources to be able to find those.
Could you repeat that web address?
Yeah, Docracy. It's like document, DOCRACY.com.
Thanks. And then the last question, are you usually agreeing to payment based on an hourly rate or a project basis?
Yeah, it really depends on the virtual assistant company and the type of work you're having done. If you can figure out the average number of hours that is of the work that's needing to be done, and your virtual assistant is comfortable with that, then it becomes kind of a monthly ongoing fee. But some work just on an hourly basis, and they work against a package number of hours. And so say you pay X number of dollars per month, and they have different packages of bundles of those hours, and they're kind of discounted by buying those hours grouped together. If they go over it by a couple of hours, they'll just charge you the hourly rate beyond those hours. So there's a lot of flexibility there. You just need to negotiate that up front with them, whether you want to work on a purely hourly basis, and if they even do that, or if you want to have a package or a project-based fee. The package, of course, is a monthly recurring, or I need work for the next 6 months. Here goes the number of hours I think it's going to take. Is that sufficient to cover your fee?
Great. For tax purposes, do we give VAs a W-9?
So again, you should talk to your tax advisor. But in essence, if this is a non-employee, you would be issuing them a W-9, of course, for the company for them to invoice you, and it would be a non-employee relationship. So this would be a 1099 contractor in essence, unless it's an entity, and then you need to talk to your tax advisor about what documentation you need to give to them. But yeah.
Great. And Ray, we have a comment that says that it looks like Docracy is shutting down.
It is. That's why I'm go now if it's still available. Otherwise, I would go to your industry associations that would have those kinds of documentations. If you have a professional trade association, obviously you can look to Google. There's a in the last webinar that we did on document automation, I actually gave a template, a series of resources for template directories, including Google Docs template directory, Microsoft Office has a template gallery, PandaDoc, and several other places that have them, in addition to Docracy, which is of course going away soon. So you can go to those places and find other templates. But again, if you want something explicitly designed for you, you should probably talk to legal counsel.
Great. Well, that's all of our questions for today. Thanks, Ray, for your time. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.